Good evening, members, and welcome to the first meeting of the Communities Scrutiny Committee for this season, I suppose, this political season. And actually, that's a very footballing term. But welcome to this evening's meeting. Just to remind you that we're also live streaming live on YouTube. And can I remind everyone that this is a public meeting and that it's being live streamed. And I'd like also to welcome all of those that are watching on YouTube as well. Okay, in the event of evacuation alarm sounding, everyone should vacate the building through the nearest exit and proceed directly to the assembly point. And the assembly point for us is between the engine shed and the car park. So I suppose we'll go out there and meet in between the two buildings. And the next point is to ask each of the members to introduce themselves. We'll start on this side with, and I won't say your name.
It's Councillor John Fox, Warrington Ward.
Councillor Charles Fenner, Bretton Ward.
Jackie Allen, East Ward.
Yeah.
Sorry. Councillor Brian Tyler, Gunthorpe Ward.
Councillor Oliver Sainsbury, Fleston and Stoneground.
Myself, Councillor Casey, Chair of this meeting.
David Beecham, Democratic Services Officer, supporting this committee.
Councillor Sievert from North Ward.
Councillor Ikra Yassin, Park Ward.
Councillor Amjad Iqbal, Central Ward.
Councillor Kirsty Knight, Alton Waterville Ward.
Thank you very much, members. And we're joined this evening by Adrian Chapman, who's Assistant Director.
Thank you, evening members. Adrian Chapman, Service Director for Communities and Partnerships.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Right, I'd like to hand over now to David, who's going to apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillor Sanford this evening, Chair.
Thank you very much. And item 2, declarations of interest and whipping declarations. Councillor Hasib.
I might have a peculiar interest in agenda item number 6.
Okay.
So, Councillor Hasib, am I right in thinking you're declaring a pecuniary interest for that item? And so you're happy to leave the room for discussion of that item?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And item 3, minutes of the Adults and Communities Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 2nd of March. Am I happy? Is everyone happy to accept these? Can I have a proposer?
I propose it.
Councillor Iqbal? And a seconder, Councillor Yassin. Is everyone agreed? Those minutes are agreed. Thank you very much, everyone. Item 4, call-in of any Cabinet and key officer decisions.
There are no call-ins this evening, Chair.
Wonderful. Right, okay, so we now move on to item 5, which is the appointment of co-opted members.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Each scrutiny committee at Peterborough can appoint up to 4 independent, non-voting co-opted members, one of which must be a parish councillor. So this evening, both parish councillors Neil Boyce and James Hayes have put themselves forward as potential co-opted members, and both of those parish councillors were, of course, members of the former Adults and Community Scrutiny Committee last year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any comments? Councillor Fox.
As I said earlier, Chair, they're a great asset to this committee. Always have been. Their input is valued, as you know, they're from different areas, and they know as much, if not more, than us sometimes. So their input is definitely 100% valued. So I support this 100%.
Okay, so we can either, I think we'll, as it seems to be a package, we can vote for both, unless, is anyone Would anyone dissent from that? Okay, so if we look, I'm looking for a proposer. Councillor Fox, would you like to propose both be
Yes,
adopted?
Chair, I'll propose both of them.
Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Iqbal. All those in favour? And I think that's unanimously agreed. So welcome to the committee. And this is Councillor Neil Boyce and James Hayes. Actually, they're sitting quite a long way. So actually, have you got nameplates? Ah, wonderful. What I now need is a telescope. And thank you very much for agreeing to be co-opted onto the committee as well. And thank you for what you're doing. I think this is a key committee, really. It's all about communities, and we discuss and we scrutinise some really important aspects of our residents' lives. Okay. Item number 6 is the item on selective licensing, and we have Joe Besant and Tom Barden. And the Cabinet Member, Councillor Steve Allen. Okay, this evening we're being asked to note the progress that's made with the introduction of this policy, note the progress that's been made in addressing poor quality housing associated and associated conditions. So we're looking to see what the progress has been made as a result of implementing this selective licensing, but also about receiving a report later on. So I'd like to hand over to Councillor Allen to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to say hello to all the members sitting on this new committee, the Communities Committee, which is the first meeting of the said committee, and it's good to present this evening. I understand the item we have before us, selective licensing, agenda item 6. It's a backward look at the current scheme, which ends later this year. It shows the successes of the scheme, including better relationships with landlords, greater compliance legislation, and improved safety for tenants. We are assessing whether there is enough evidence to submit an application for a new 5-year scheme. We have to meet strict evidence requirements, and the submission will be to the Secretary of State. If we do go ahead, we will bring the proposals to scrutiny in September as part of the former public consultation. That's my introduction. I will be here to answer questions that are appropriate to myself, my portfolio, but obviously reliant on the officers, which is Joe Besant and Adrian Chapman, to take other questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, members, have we got any questions? Councillor Sainsbury.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be interested to know, on the enforcement side of things, what enforcement is being carried out to ensure that all properties that require a licence are applying for one, and if there have been any instances to date where you found that landlords don't have one when they should have.
So as far as enforcement is concerned, I've got a team of selective licensing officers. Part of their role is to investigate any potential properties that may need to have a licence, and then to make sure that the landlord applies for a licence. We have probably about 14 or 15 that we've actually taken to court during the term of the scheme, where a landlord just completely refused to license the property. Most of them, once we catch up with them, they do license. We give them an opportunity to do so, and they pay a higher fee for doing so. And we have probably about 180 that we're currently still investigating, where we suspect that they need a license, but we've not managed to actually get enough evidence to prove that at this moment in time. That work's ongoing all the time.
And then just under the HMO part of the report, it says about how the housing enforcement has been involved with supporting in the COVID work. I'd just be interested, and it does say how inspections and enforcement work have been radically reduced. And I would just be interested to know if they're still redeployed, and you know how challenging it's been for your officers not being able to carry out. You know, what implications has that had on enforcement as a whole?
So the majority of my officers were actually redeployed during the lockdowns. Left me with 2 officers to actually manage incoming caseloads and the like for that period of time. We managed really well, actually. What we found was that landlords were really very compliant during the COVID. We didn't find lots of illegal evictions. We didn't find, you know, we could do the majority of things over the telephone, working with agents, and that works particularly well within our selective licensing area because we've been able to build up really good working relationships with agents over the past 5 years. So we've been able to just pick the phone up and get a lot of the work and things done. So during the COVID, it's been really, really good. What it has done is caused us a huge backlog of HMOs because we weren't allowed to go into any HMOs. And we sort of just, now the team are all back, we're just sort of working through those, but we've got a couple of hundred left to inspect now. And, you know, cases that weren't deemed urgent, we're now just picking all those back up again. So that's the focus of our attention at the moment.
Councillor Allen.
I noted in the report that the level of antisocial behaviour has gone up in the areas where selective licensing is applied. Is that going to be the focus of how will you determine what other areas you will be looking at to include in selective licensing if you proceed with this scheme?
So excuse me, sorry. So the conditions for looking at a selective licensing area, there's 6 or 7 which are set out in the early part of the report, and antisocial behaviour is one of those conditions, so will form part of the calculations that we use in order to identify which areas should be included in any future selective licensing area.
Can I just have a follow-up? Yes. And this might not apply, or it probably doesn't apply just to selective licensing areas, but is it good practice to have a badge on a door that says, this is the landlord and this is his contact or her contact details? Would this deter, if there is antisocial behaviour, that at least the landlords can be the first people to be identified to come and maybe resolve the issues?
It's not something that we've come across before. I've not known any of the council have a badge on a door, but there is, what we do have is a public register of all rented properties that are licensed, and that is freely accessible to anybody on the internet. So if somebody is aware that there's an issue in a neighbourhood, they want to know if it's a selective licensed property, you can just look it up on the register. I don't know whether landlords would be receptive to having to put something like that on the door, because it would clearly make the property then stand out as a rental property, rather than just blending in with the rest of the neighbourhood. But
I only asked because I saw John Lewis was going into the rental sector and they are going to be putting their plaques on the door, so I just thank you.
Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. Are you interested in introducing this scheme to other areas such as Alton's or anywhere else that are not doing the selective licensing elsewhere?
So in order to introduce a scheme, what we will look at is the data right across the whole city, the same as we did last time. So we'll repeat the same exercise and look at all the areas across the city, because things change as time goes on, and see which areas meet the criteria. As Tom said, the 6 criteria set out by government. You only need to meet one of those criteria in order to have a scheme. But last time what we did is we chose all the areas that met 5 or 6 of the criteria to make sure that we were focusing on the areas that really would benefit from a scheme. And we'll do exactly the same again and see which areas come out.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I've got a few questions. Now, in your report, you've said on page 16 that to date 6,500 licenses have been issued, with 660 refused and 202 revoked. Now, am I right to understand that if they are refused, you take legal action and make sure that they make a further application? But if they're revoked, is that the same process that you follow?
No, if a licence is refused, or we're going to refuse a licence, first of all, we would work with the landlord on the grounds that we're going to refuse it and try to come to an alternative arrangement so that we're not taking property out of the rented sector. If a licence is revoked, a revocation would tend to be around where a property is been sold and that person is no longer the owner or the licence holder of the property, or in a situation where somebody's died, or if they've moved into the property and it becomes let as part of, for their family. So it doesn't need to have a licence anymore. So that's what the revocations are.
In terms of cost, obviously the ward I represent, there are a lot that comes within the selective licensing. There are a lot of properties there. A lot of landlords have issues in terms of what the fee is going to be. Now, in your report, you've said that the fee that you're going to sort of allocate to the scheme has to just cover the cost. What sort of fee are we looking at?
That we can't determine until we've determined our areas. So once we've determined our areas, how big it is and how many properties there are going to be, then we'll be able to work out what the fee is from there. But I can't see it being too dissimilar to what we had as a standard fee last time.
Thank you. Now, from your report, it clearly says that the purpose of the scheme was to help to improve the standard of private rented housing and to prove safe and warm house for residents. Now, how successful have we been in achieving this so far?
We're looking at the data at the moment. It's gone really, really well in as much as what's happened. What we found has happened is that landlords that, not rogue landlords, but landlords that sort of got into it accidentally, don't really know what they're doing, had one property, maybe two properties. A lot of those have moved and given their properties to agents so that the agents manage them. So we've seen a rise in the professionalism of landlords throughout the management of properties, and also a lot of landlords went on and did their own accreditation, so went off and got educated on what they should be doing and their legal responsibilities. So we've seen things like a fall in illegal evictions and requests for service on illegal evictions, because landlords actually understand that they can't just ask somebody to leave, they've got to give proper notices, that kind of thing. We've also seen a massive improvement in compliance with the housing conditions, and it seems to be that because they know we're coming anyway, they've got to get it done, sort of thing. So when we initially set out doing our inspections, or we did the initial inspection on all the properties, what we did at that time, anything we found wrong, we said, you've got to put it right now, we'll be coming back at some point because we'll risk score you, and if it's not put right by then, we'll be looking at enforcement action. So we're giving you an opportunity now to do it. And many, many landlords took that, and we even had some where they small repairs, they were ringing us by the time we got back to the office. They were ringing, I've got it done, can you come and check? So a lot of landlords have got on board, and we find a lot better compliance. And even some of like portfolio holder landlords have gone and refurbed their whole portfolios. So create on houses that hadn't been touched for many, many years. So yeah, from our point of view, it's gone really, really well in that respect.
Final question, Chair.
Right, okay.
My understanding of the selective licensing was that in terms of antisocial behaviour, the landlord or the agent will be responsible for it as well. Is that still the case, or have I misunderstood that? I mean, for example, if there was antisocial behaviour in a property, is the landlord's job to deal with it, or the council would take action against them? Am I right to understand it that way, or am I wrong?
No, you have misunderstood that. The landlord's responsibility around antisocial behaviour is to make sure that he'd done all the relevant checks and everything, so he knew what sort of tenancy he was getting, and make sure he kept all his paperwork. But also, if there was antisocial behaviour, to work with the council and to work with other bodies such as, Cross Keys or whoever, in dealing with the antisocial behaviour. So it was about him having the duty to provide a warning letter that we're aware there's antisocial behaviour, you need to stop it, otherwise, this could end up losing your tenancy, and to take action through the courts if it got that far.
In essence, am I right to understand that he will be supporting, I mean, his role will be as supporting the council, cooperating with the council? Thank you.
Actually, I think that last question was excellent from Councillor Iqbal, because I think as councillors there are lots of queries like that, and I know I've come up against times when it's been very difficult to establish who the landlord is if you need something done. And one of my questions for this was going to be, have we had any lessons learned from the implementation of the scheme so far? How can we tweak it to be better? If indeed we have found anything that could be better, and how, you know, how are we aiming to make it a gold standard service going forward, and have we got the capacity based on the new information that's come in? Because I read in the report that we discovered more HMOs and more rental properties than we, and is that going to how's it going to change?
Okay. As far as lessons learned, yeah, of course we've learned lessons through the scheme. It was the first time we've done a big scale scheme of that nature, and there were quite a few lessons that we learned around IT, about the data that we gather through it, about what can be useful going forward. So we started to make those changes within our system. We've listened very closely to landlords and agents. One of the big bugbears that they had was when they're trying to license multiple properties. Some people have like 100 properties and you sat there doing 100 applications. That's enough to drive the letting agents. And we've taken feedback, and we're continuing to take feedback, and we will do throughout the next consultation and try and build in, like you say, the changes to make it a gold standard scheme next time.
Members, do we have any further questions? Oh, Councillor Yassin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers, for the report. Just a couple of really quick questions. So you mentioned that you had to issue some legal proceedings against some landlords. Is there any particular reason that you've identified as to why they didn't comply? And as councillors, if there is anything, what can we do to support you in your work?
Thank you. The main reason for people not complying was either they didn't believe that we would follow through on that we would actually take them to court, or we would issue them with a civil penalty, and they just believed that the council would go away. I think there wasn't any real reason why, genuine reason why somebody didn't apply for a licence. They just dug in and said no, or just ignored us. And we go really over the top. You know, we actually go round and try to speak to them, and we write them letters, and we invite them in. You know, we really go over the top to try and get these licences in, because obviously issuing a penalty is a lot more money than actually going through the licensing process. So we do put all the steps in place to help, first of all. And no, so there isn't a particular reason. It's just people must have thought, I'll see if I can keep my head down and get away with it, I think. And as councillors for helping us, thank you. It would be about getting the word out to people in the constituency. If have a look at the register if your next door's rented, because there is no register of what's rented. It's down to people telling us or us going out and finding them. So the more people that report things into us, the more we can go and check. And it's what we've found now is it's the ones that are really poor that we're finding. You know, nobody's coming forward and telling us, or the tenants don't sort of complain to us because of the conditions, but we're coming across them, and they're the really, the really poor ones now.
Councillor Iqbal.
I think it's going to be a final question. The practice I run, we always send a feedback to the client and ask them how satisfied they were with our service. That gives me an opportunity to check if I could improve in any way. Now, obviously, you are providing a service to the landlords. So am I right to understand that you give them a sort of feedback questionnaire where they fill in? I mean, I would say if you don't, that would be a very good idea to do that, because you'll get feedback from them, because obviously they are the one who actually practically are engaged with it. They will be able to feedback with the problems which you could rectify and look into. Is that something that you do, or would you consider that as a good thing to do?
It's not something that we do. Landlords are quite happy to give us feedback without a questionnaire. We get a lot of feedback fairly continuously, but that will come as part of the consultation. So there'll be opportunities throughout the next consultation to feedback on how this one's gone, and to feedback on, you know, what changes they want to see, and what improvements they want us to make, and anything that's over and above what we already know about. But yeah, we get feedback continuously.
Thank you. Right, no more questions. We're asked to note the progress made in addressing poor quality housing and associated...
Chair, sorry, I did have my hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up because I thought that one of the questions was very relevant. What can councillors do to assist with the management of the scheme? Councillors are the eyes and ears. Election time, councillors are going out knocking on every door, but the rest of the year they're also going around the community, and if they find houses that they believe are not licensed that should be in the scheme, I do think they should report it to the relevant officers. So I think, sorry to interrupt your closing, but I think councillors, that's what we should do, and share that information with our colleagues. We are the eyes and ears, and we need to report to the officers any concerns we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Can I actually, just a quick question then. So who are the officers? Because I would probably go to Communities. I'd go through Adrian's department to Communities department, or would it be, who would we report it to?
So Joe works in my department, so I say to any member, if you're unsure, just come straight to the director, in this case me, and I have some amazing people, Joe included, at in my team, who I refer these things to. So just come straight to me.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Adrian. Thank you very much, Steve, as well. Thank you. So, members, we have to note the progress made in addressing poor quality housing and associated conditions as a result of selective licensing scheme, and also receive we've got to recommend that we want to receive a further report outlining full details of a proposed new selective licensing scheme as part of a public consultation, should such an application be justified. And I think, based on the conversation this evening, I think we probably all agree that we're hoping that it will be justified. But is everyone in agreement with that? Does anyone have any other points? No? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Hasib can now rejoin us. Okay, members, we're going to move on to item 7, which is scrutinising the Peterborough cultural strategy. And we've got Adrian, who I've agreed will stay at my right hand. Yes, and Steve's going to stay where he is as well. I know the last time I did that, I held the wrong one and said the wrong word, so I always have to double check now. Okay, so I'd like to hand over. Who's going to introduce this? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. It's me again. Jamie Fenton, who was going to be with us, is poorly, so Adrian, as he's indicated, will be presenting. And my introduction to the item 7, with regard to the culture strategy. We're in the throes of a comprehensive co-production with the cultural sector and friends groups, covering arts, heritage, libraries, to present the new cultural strategy with all the views taken on board. Alongside the steering group, comprising reps from key cultural organisations, we have commissioned a culture forum where tens of cultural practitioners come together regularly to discuss key issues. This feeds into the process. Part of the report includes the initial recommendations that the steering group have identified. These will be refined and used to form an action plan to accompany the strategy. Our plan is to present back to Scrutiny in September with the final draft strategy, and then to take to Cabinet and Council for full approval. We recognise the significant value culture must play in the city's recovery, as well as supporting economic growth, inward investment and community cohesion. The paper is a fairly weighty tome, and I trust members have had a chance to go through all the references in there, and I'm happy to take questions on any elements of the report you see before you, and of course rely on Adrian for the more deep dig questions, should you have any. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Okay, members, let's move to questions. Councillor Sainsbury.
Thank you, Chair. You know, as a young person myself, I think it's really good to see that young people have been placed at the heart of the strategy. And I think really, I know it says how we're in phase 3 at the minute, you know, targeted exploration of specific issues to create a final set of recommendations. And I'd just be interested to, you know, if you've got any more information on how this is going or what outcomes you are hoping from getting, you know, from your consultation of the young people.
Thank you very much. Yeah, great question, and I agree with you. Young people need to be at the centre of this work. I'll just echo what Councillor Allen said in that this is an incredibly positive piece of work to be engaged with on the tail end, hopefully, of the last year and a half, which has been ravaging in many ways for our economy and for our communities. So to do something which is so positive, to bring communities back together again, is really important for the city and its recovery. Yet the young people's engagement piece, we've taken a decision to make front and centre of this work, and there have been a series of workshops held with practitioners, not people in suits like me, but real people out there that are used to working with different parts of our community, very skilled in what they do, from the cultural sector, from the education sector, from the skills sector, and from employers and others, to try and really feel what it's like to live in the shoes of a young person in our city through the lens of culture. And I should just point out, culture in this sense isn't just art, it's heritage, it's libraries, it's everything about arts, culture and heritage in our city. It's very all-encompassing, so significant breadth and range. So what we see in the Appendix 2, is a raft of recommendations, early recommendations, which many of which include reference to young people and what young people are actually telling us. And a number of quotes and films will be included in the final strategy, so that we make sure we are being genuine and authentic to those views. So I'm really hopeful what you'll see is something very different, something which young people can engage with, as well as all of our other citizens. Something relevant, meaningful, worthwhile, not the kind of pink and fluffy stuff that people often associate with culture, but actually something that's real and authentic for Peterborough.
Can I just have a follow-up? Yeah. No, that's really good. Thanks, Adrian. And I did just want to make a comment about one of the recommendations, which I think is PP3. And I'm sure you, your team will be aware, but I think, you know, I used to be on the Peterborough Youth Council, and I'm sure you already are, but I think it's really important to, you know, consult them because they represent so many different communities. And, you know, plain devil's advocate, if you like, the ward I represent's, you know, very mixed in age, and I do have a high elderly population as well. So I think really, you know, as this report says, it is a very diverse city, and I think it is great there is such a focus on young people, but I do think it is really important that we get views of our elderly population as well, because obviously, you know, I'm young now, but eventually I'm going to be old, and I don't know what my views will be like then, if you like. So what, you know, I just want some reassurance really that there is work and consultation be done with the elder population too.
Thank you. Yeah, unfortunately it catches up with us all. I used to be young. So just to comment on the Youth Council point, first of all, absolutely agree with you. We're blessed to have a fantastic Youth Council. You were part of that, as you say, and it's grown up in our city. We've followed it and supported it through the years, and they are very engaged. So are young people who aren't involved formally in that kind of structure. One of the things I should just point out is that our proposition is to stand up a culture board for the city, not a city council board for culture, but a culture board for Peterborough, which we will be part of, but will be independently chaired and have practitioners, investors, audiences represented around the table. And I'm really hopeful there will be young people with equal stature around the table. We perhaps can talk offline, old person to young person, about how we might encourage young people to engage in a board kind of environment. And you're absolutely right on older people, in fact all communities, whatever their background or context or circumstance, whether that's people from different countries that have come to live in Peterborough, whether it's unemployed people, older people, whatever circumstance, we want this to be as inclusive as possible and celebrate all that's good about the diversity of our city. So there has been an extensive amount of engagement throughout the phase 2 of the programme so far with all sorts of groups, all sorts of audiences. We've got some fantastic friends groups that Councillor Allen and I meet with regularly, from the Key Theatre, the museum, the libraries, Flag Fen. So lots of representative bodies. And there are 5 themes emerging in the culture strategy. They are briefly mission, so setting up cultural leadership for the city, which is robust and clear programming and so on. Connections, building on what's already here, making new connections, building on existing networks. Money, important, that we make sure we've got the investment and that we spend the money we've got wisely. But then 2 important things that will make sure we make this inclusive. One of those is about our places. So what is it like to live in Millfield or Gunthorpe or Warrington or Hampton or Castor, and make sure that culture touches those residents, young and old. And then people, the 5th and most important plank, which is about the role of our citizens, the role of our practitioners, the role of us as officers and councillors to promote culture and all that's positive about Peterborough. So I'm hoping what you'll see in September is something which is really all-encompassing, and anybody will look at it and recognise their voice, their perception in it, that we can continue to grow over the next 10 years.
Councillor Allen.
What's the saying? I couldn't have said it any better myself, but funny enough, I did make some notes following Councillor Sainsbury's question. I think that we need to look at the culture strategy as providing, encompassing the views of highbrow and lowbrow. All voices need to be heard, all ages and all communities, and also commercial interests, because commercial companies, providers, do provide culture with a small c rather than the sort of high form big C culture. And I think that Dave from Dogsthorpe and his kids might want to go to something that by the way, Dave from Dogsthorpe is a legendary character, being brought up in many of these culture debates over the years, so I use that not in a negative way. But I think we have to cater for everyone of every age, and the culture strategy, when I've been speaking to those putting inputs and with officers, needs to embrace right across the board, and totally embracing what Councillor Sainsbury has identified as a need. Young people don't just go out and have a dance, have a bop and have a beer. That's part of the culture that we need to embrace and provide for. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. Councillor Yassine.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions. Do you want me to ask them together?
Yes.
Okay, no worries. So my first question is in regards to engagement. Have you identified any barriers in regards to engaging with community groups, and how have they been addressed, and how will you continue to address those? And my second question is, we've got a huge facility coming to our city, the university, which will host many different culture groups, many different age groups, all under one roof, learning together. So are there any plans in engaging with the university or working collectively with the university to promote culture?
Great, thank you. 2 great questions. Thank you very much. On engagement, has been challenging across the board over the last 18 months because the kind of, in some ways, challenging. The traditional ways that we'd normally engage with communities has been more difficult for obvious reasons, but actually it's also allowed us to be a bit more creative. So when we've wanted to talk to community groups, whether it's about the culture strategy, whether it's about the vaccination programme, whether it's about a council policy in a different part of the organisation, we've had to find ways of reaching out. And I think we've all become experts in Zoom. Large-scale Zoom calls can be incredibly powerful, and actually for a lot of people we're hearing voices that we've never heard before because they are not intimidated in that kind of virtual world, which has been phenomenal. So I think there's always more we could do, and I think we're now into phase 3, as Councillor Sainsbury mentioned, which is the really intensive consultation phase ahead of bringing the draft strategy back to you in September. And what you'll see over the summer months is, the PM has announced the lifting of most restrictions, I think, now from the 19th of July, so we can start to get back into physical spaces with groups, go to them and not expect them to come to us, which is, again, the old-fashioned way of doing things. Particularly keen to engage with communities with different ethnicities, different languages that may have prevented them from engaging in cultural services and assets before, and getting in touch with audiences once again that haven't been able to participate in an audience for the last 18 months. So I would say it's been challenging, but actually we've learned a heck of a lot from it, and actually one of the very few positives from the pandemic, I think, is that kind of skill set that we've all learned, and this fact that we're hearing voices now that we've not heard before. I just hope we don't lose again. And absolutely, the university, what a gift to a city that's just developing its culture strategy. To have a new university coming on stream is really perfect timing for us. You'll probably have seen the press coverage recently about the Levelling Up Fund, which includes investment on the embankment and also in the Vine, the former TK Maxx shop, which is about bringing culture more into the psyche of our population, bringing it into the city, making culture a destination, whether it's, again, a participatory event, whether it's just bringing cultural practitioners together. And the university are right alongside us in helping shape how that will look and feel. So we'll see in the Vine, which will be a cultural centre, a cultural hub for the city centre on the High Street, the university will have a presence in there and bring some of the students through courses which are linked to the cultural sector. There's a big economy, I think, here in Peterborough we can develop in cultural employment, and the university are very, very engaged with that, as are Peterborough College and City College Peterborough, I should say. So a really strong skills platform, I think, from which to build.
Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. Adrian, have you considered the consultation going through the parish councillors, because they cover a lot of the area, and another one is something that's quite special to me and you, is the community champions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Yes, absolutely. We've developed, the last meeting we held of the steering group a couple of weeks ago, we developed a consultation list, if you like, a stakeholder list, and the Parish Council Forum was actually listed down there. If any parish councillor here or listening or looking back wants us to engage individually, be really, really happy to do that and come out and talk specifically about your place. You know, what's happening in Bretton and what's happening in Castor, very different, and we want to make it this hyper-local, so we want to make it relevant for people, not to have to travel too far to get their cultural take-up. So we'll certainly be engaging with the forum, and if you want us to come out to your parishes, very, very happy to do so. I think the Community Champions is a great idea. So for members that aren't aware, at the start of the pandemic, we formed a group of community leaders, community activists, community voices that started off at about 12 or 15, representing different nationalities, different ethnicities, different faiths, different communities, to just help us spread really important messages about COVID security and compliance. And that group has grown and grown. Councillor Boyce is a very active member on that group. And again, much like the previous comment about something good coming out of the pandemic, that's certainly one of them, and I'd like to see that group continue. It's not on our list, it will be now. So thank you for the prompt. Very good suggestion.
Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you very much for your report, Adrian. As always, a very comprehensive report. My question is, considering that I represent Central Ward and City Centre is located in Central Ward. Now, on page 22, section 4.2, where you said, developing marketing relations especially with Visit Peterborough. Now, when you, I mean, do please, if you could expand on that. The way I look at it is that looking at the city centre at the moment, I'm failing to understand what they're going to visit, other than the cathedral. So can you just expand on that? What do you mean by that? Thank you.
Certainly. Well, do you know, one of the things that I've been blown away by, it's not a very professional phrase, but it's fact, is that just the sheer volume of cultural activity that is going on under our noses. And that includes the city centre, but it also includes the rest of your ward and every member's ward in this room tonight. I've been staggered by the amount of small groups, theatre groups, music groups. Our chair heavily involved in that sector, reading groups, you know, knitting groups. You know, these are all things that are under the auspices of culture, and they bring people together, they celebrate what people have in common. And one of the weaknesses that we're trying to address is the fact that we hear questions like that all of the time, despite that happening. And I think you've hit the nail on the head for me. The strategy has to pull all of that together and create a single narrative for our city. I don't know about you, I'm being Peterboroughian through and through. I'm fed up of people saying there isn't a cultural offer. This isn't criticising you, by the way. I mean, people generally say we're a cultural cold spot, which is really annoying, especially what I've discovered over the last couple of years. And I think the culture strategy needs to bring that together and create a narrative which makes it obvious why people want to come to Peterborough.
Sorry, Councillor Allen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A couple of points I'd like to just pick up and reassure Councillor Boyce that I had a meeting with the leader with Arts Council England only last week, and I did make sure that as a rural parish councillor I made sure that the communities outside the city centre would be included in the considerations of the Arts Council when funding Peterborough, but that also embraced parish councils in the inner city area, so on side with that. And certainly we've pushed back on the cultural's cold spot that Adrian Chapman just mentioned. There are lots of things happening in this city. We've just got to shout about them a bit more and engage more people. And so I think that's why this culture strategy, although still in its formative stage, is so important to the Build Back Better and the recovery process following the pandemic.
Actually, I'd like to just come in a little bit, because I suppose we've just been through 18 months of a pandemic where we experienced, firstly, I suppose the first 4 months was complete lockdown, but we also then on Thursdays we had the clap for the NHS, and on Thursdays, and then you had people going outside and performing instruments, you had people making art, creating art and doing cultural activities. And actually this might be a time when people realise the true value of culture, not necessarily culture that's it's live, isn't it? Not necessarily culture that's sort of thrown at you down the main channels but actually culture that people can create themselves for each other, and that's about communities developing culture themselves. And I think this could be an ideal opportunity to really energise. One of the questions that I was going to have was, why did the public seem disinterested in culture? But actually, one of the things that really raised my heart during the last 18 months was that people were fundamentally engaged in culture, but they didn't realise, and they don't necessarily understand what it is. But that's something that the cultural strategy could do, and you could have a huge engagement, and that could be a huge target. Any other questions? Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. The Peterborough's Artist Open Studios is currently underway across and beyond the city. Many of the artists that we've actually spoken to have mentioned a lack of interest in their work on part of the council. Is there a reason for this? And they have massive desire for a workshop-style facility in the city, if this is possible.
Oh, that's really sad, actually. I hate hearing things like that, so I will correct that immediately. And if perhaps as part of the action notes, David will capture that as an action for me to follow up with you. I'll be in touch and we'll get some contact details. It certainly won't be a deliberate reason at all, so I can't explain why, but we'll fix it. And I love the idea of central-based studio facility. I mean, one of the things we're doing at the moment as part of phase 3 of the cultural strategy development work is reviewing all of the assets in the city, physical fixed assets, buildings largely, but also equipment, both in council ownership and also cultural assets that are run by other organisations, such as the Cathedral, our biggest cultural asset in the city, really, and with a view to thinking about how we might use that space differently, more collaboratively, how we might bring groups together using that space. And if you just look at the council's own buildings, they're significant. And I've mentioned the Vine, a new project. It will take a few years to get off the page into reality, but what a great facility that would be for an art group or any other type of group to come together. So we'll build that into the narrative for the cultural strategy that comes back in September, and I will definitely pick up with you offline the re-engagement or engagement maybe for the first time, it sounds, for the art group in particular.
Councillor Allen.
Chair. We make reference to using spaces in educational buildings, and it seems to me that communities would massively improve if schools were opened up outside of school hours. That there's a commercial opportunity where there are schools that offer school clubs, you know, that take the pressure off parents in school holidays. They do day trips, they do crafts, they do so many things, and I even if somebody goes in on a commercial basis and rents that space, I believe that schools should be opening up, you know, 24/7 really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I totally agree with you. There are a few anchor buildings, we call them, or anchor organisations in a community, and the school is definitely one of them. So is a GP surgery. I like to think libraries, where we've got libraries, are an anchor type organisation. And a bit like schools, actually, our libraries are closed more than they're open. We've got to reverse that. It's a bit easier with libraries, perhaps, than it is with schools, but I totally agree with you. Schools are safe spaces. They're seen as neutral in many ways, like a library, the Director of Education has been engaged as part of the development of the culture strategy to try and work with schools to find a way of opening up those facilities more, even if it's just to the small school community, ideally beyond that. But you know, most of our schools are community schools embedded in the heart of a community. So again, we'll make sure that that features heavily in the final strategy. But I'd also like to include you know, libraries in that offer. We need to get them open. There's no real reason why a library shouldn't be used by an artists group out of hours. You know, it's available, it sits there, it's empty most of the time. So things like that I think you'll see starting to come forward.
Councillor Haseeb and then Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. Aidan, something you mentioned earlier on, and you said, you know, what the cost could be and spending it wisely. Is it too early to consider what the cost could be?
There's always the money question. So quite right too, actually. What would I say about that? I'd say that we know that we are ripe for investment. Councillor Allen mentioned the meeting that he and the leader had with the Arts Council last week, and that was specifically to share, you don't mind me, I'm sure, saying the nature of the meeting was really about sharing the leadership's aspirations for culture in our city, and fair to say the Arts Council were extremely engaged. They, like most funders, are going through quite a lot of turbulence at the moment because a great deal of their funding had to be directed towards the Cultural Recovery Fund to keep cultural assets going during the pandemic, and therefore they're resetting their funding priorities. But the absolute impression that we gained was that we are a priority for funding. What scale that will look like will remain to be seen. But we're also trying to bend other funds that we have had into our city towards the cultural agenda. So the Levelling Up Fund, for example, the Towns Fund, are all projects that are funded by government that we've been able to divert some funding towards cultural activity, or to show how culture can play a part in the city centre's recovery. So you'll see soon some city centre animation, we're calling it. So you come into the city for shopping, but you'll get entertained at the same time. I'm no cultural guru here, so I'm not selling it very well, but go with me, and hopefully it will make it a bit more of a visitor experience, to Councillor Reedbell's point. And things like that we can use some of this growth funding for. And then we've got significant investment of our own still in our cultural and leisure services, net £2.4 million still spent on culture and leisure in our city, gyms as well as cultural services such as the museum, libraries and the Key Theatre. So that's a very vague answer, but I think you'll see external investment coming. We're a city that's ripe for it, and the strategy will unlock it. And the fact that we haven't got a strategy is a deterrent at the moment for funders, but that will unlock it.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. I get very angry over people that call this city and say there's nothing to do. One of the biggest things I've missed in the 18 months of the pandemic is going into the city. I missed Diwali, the Italian festival, all those festivals that we used to attend. I also miss going around the market, tasting all the different food from the street stalls, if you want to call them that. I know the markets rather than street stalls, but they're absolutely fantastic. I miss that. I miss sitting out there in the sun, when we get the sun, and just watching the world go by. And the city is improving. It is vibrant, and what we've got to do, and I'm sure you will, Adrian, is as soon as possible get these things put back on, because that brings people into the city. It shares our various cultures together, and it embraces what we're all about, and that's accepting everybody for who they are and what they are. So I've missed that, and I'm sure most people here have missed that. Let's hurry up and get back to it and make these people that are complaining, show them that this city is thriving and it is a good city. It's not a bad city. In fact, it's a superb city.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fox.
May I just quickly make a comment? Sorry,
yes.
Councillor Casey, you're keen to move on, but thank you. I totally agree with you, of course. But I just wanted to quickly say that not only do we want to get them back into the calendar, we want to do it bigger and better. We've never really had a single programme of festivals. We've got our kind of regular festivals. You mentioned Diwali, for example, and the Heritage Festival, but we've never really pulled that together into a plan for the year that says, actually, this is all that's great about Peterborough in one programme, and that programme is, supported, sponsored, promoted throughout subsequent years, and that's what you will see emerging from the strategy.
And Councillor Fox.
If I can come back, we were getting there. We were there. We were getting there, and then the pandemic come along, and now we've got to build that back up again. And I'm sure you will. And with everybody's support, we know we will. So that's fantastic.
Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. Adrian, Councillor Allen, have you considered a register of groups? I know the parish liaison were looking at it last year, and I'm involved with the charity, as Adrian knows. And we had a meeting in the parish asking what community groups, and I could come up with about 20, but we got the residents involved, and we actually had over 60, which was like arts groups, music groups, choirs, in one parish. And I think a lot of those people from outside the city wouldn't know they exist, but it also worked where neighbouring parishes, if they hadn't got an arts group, there was one in the next parish. So I think a register, which could be available, would be really good for people.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I was just trying to look for the recommendation which refers to something similar, and I'm sure it's in there, but I couldn't immediately find it. But the idea of supporting cultural groups by promoting them has to start with that register. If we don't know what's in the city, we can't really expect those groups to thrive, let alone audiences to participate. So it is in the recommendations, and again, we'll make sure we major on that in the strategy final version. I should say all of the comments tonight that this is for me part of the consultation process building up to that draft strategy in September. So these will all be taken into that final production, and hopefully you'll see your comments reflected.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Actually, I think that's been a really good session. One of the things that certainly I picked up there, because over the pandemic, lots of people have changed their methods of shopping, and people have been trying to rack their brains and trying to work out what the role of city centres is going to be going forward. And actually, I think that idea that it's experiential, so people go in, they may well do their shopping online more because it's happening, but actually they want to go in and experience the city centre, which involves meeting people. It involves experiencing culture, and arts could actually be a key role, play a key role in that. I don't know if that's the role of this committee, but certainly, hopefully, someone will be listening, sort of going forward, because actually that could be really exciting. So, we'll wind this up. But that's been a really good discussion. Thank you very much, members. So it's recommended that we note and comments on the overall approach being taken to the development of and significance of the new culture strategy for Peterborough. We scrutinise the vision and values document, and we scrutinise the emerging recommendations. So I think we've done that. We spent a lot of time at the beginning discussing about the ages, which I think is a good takeaway, because I think one of the things that came out for me was, are you over the hill when you're 18? And one of the dangers that we have is that we will consult little brothers and sisters when they're 14, and the poor old 18-year-olds get forgotten. And you know, what sort of, is that something to look forward to? 60 years in the wilderness. Or thereabouts. Right. Okay. Any other recommendations? But I think we've scrutinised that, and we've given lots of ideas to think of going forward. Thank you very much, members. Thank you. So we'll now move on to item 8, which is the Think Communities approach to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, including on economic, health and well-being factors, and to reduce inequality. And we've got Matt Oliver, and is Sean here today? No. So we've just got Matt and Councillor Howard as Cabinet Advisor. I can't see. Is Councillor Allen still at the table as well? Okay.
Yes, yes, I am. Whenever you're ready, Chair.
I've got a sea of screens between us. Okay, so who's going to introduce this?
I'll kick off and say that it's not me doing it, it's my Cabinet Advisor, Councillor Howard, who is leading on the Think Communities element of my portfolio.
Excellent, thank you very much. And welcome, Councillor Howard.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thanks, everyone. Congratulations to the new members who have joined the committee, and nice to see some familiar faces back again as well. Hope you're all well. So, yeah, obviously we've got a very mixed report, a very comprehensive report, covering a lot of different issues, but just to give some background to it, the Think Communities approach has been active for the last 2 years. I think when you consider what's been happening in the last 18 months, you could say the timing hasn't been better in hindsight to get this new approach going. And there's a small team working on Think Communities in the council, but the sort of the philosophy of it is supported by the whole organisation. And it's evidenced, if you like, the joint working of it by the setting up of the COVID hub, which really, if you want a sort of example of Think Communities and how it works, the COVID hub has been an absolute prime example of what can be achieved. The hub was able to work hand in hand with internal and external partners. They were working with public services such as health, fire, police, the voluntary sector, parish councils, councillors, candidates. There was a wide range of support and networking that was done and made what happened possible. And by doing so, we were able to reach residents who, to be fair, may otherwise have been hidden to services until later on in time. And if you look at the figures, there was over 90 community groups who are all working collaboratively to ensure that the Think Communities approach was delivered in real time, supporting some of our most vulnerable residents. And it's incredible to think over 3,000 issues were resolved so far through that hub. Just remarkable, really, but it does show what's possible. And what it has done as well from the council's perspective is established a good framework that we can use going forwards now. I think we've probably learnt a lot of best practice along the way, and we've learnt how much can be achieved through collaborating with, voluntary community organisations, and really just everyone working closer together. The hub is a remarkable example of that. And the report also talks through 3 different impact areas. And like I say, it's a very mixed and weighty agenda, so I hope you've had a chance to read the reports. It's very interesting. But there's 3 impact areas. There's the economic impact of COVID-19, there's the physical health impact, and also the mental health impact as well. You know, tonight we've heard the Prime Minister announce that on July 19th, people, the restrictions are relaxed. But obviously on the mental health aspect, you can't, just because you're told you can relax, doesn't mean people will be relaxed, or not everyone will be. You know, so there's a lot of repercussions from COVID, some still to be seen. So there's lots to consider, lots to think about, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and discussion on the preparations that are being done to deal with heightened evictions and equality issues, obviously since the changes on the 1st of June, and how the Think Communities approach can meet the wider needs of mental health and well-being, and through community involvement, participation, and an improved environment as well. So that's a very, very sort of brief outline of the report, but myself and Matt would be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members? Councillor Sainsbury.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start by actually saying, I think the COVID Coordination Hub has actually been a massive credit to the Council, and I think, everybody should be involved, should be really proud of the achievements, and I really hope that aspect of the hub can be continued after the pandemic, and I'm sure, that's something that will happen. And I have 2 questions, really, and the first is about the housing needs service and the support, and I suppose all the support really, and I'll just be interested to know if there is signposting going on and awareness of this on council social media, so tenants are aware of the support available to them, because if there is, I think it would be really helpful to know for us as councillors, so we can also signpost any inquiries we may get. And the second question I had was about people at risk of poor mental health outcomes, and coming out from the pandemic, poor mental health is probably going to be at a very high level. More people will need support, and this number may grow even further when furlough stops and more redundancies are apparent. And I'd just be interested to know if the council are prepared for a possible spike in the amount of residents needing support.
So I'll take the first one as far as I can, and I think that in the report on the last bullet point around the housing and the eviction sections, it talks about the strong links between the hub and internal services such as housing. And one of the things that we have been able to do is to reach out really with that support through comms campaigns to make sure that we are reaching the people that need us. And as you said, probably that's one of the aspects that really is valuable to carry on. So we definitely have noted that we need to reach out to those tenants that might need support, and with Sean, the head of housing's help, who was due to be here tonight, we absolutely will do that. And again, it's the same with the mental health aspects. So I mentioned in the report were a couple of things that we were doing together around mental health. And the community reference group that has been set up, it's got over 50 organisations involved with it, pulled together fact sheets and information. And so we're always trying to think of different ways that we can reach out to support those that need us, and then where there's more kind of clinical need or more expert need, kind of look at the commissioning of that and working with our commissioning partners and our health colleagues and others to be able to try and signpost as best we can to that as well.
Councillor Allen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just to come in on the evictions, Councillor Sainsbury, we have a housing meeting every Monday morning, and I did address that with officers this morning. And thus far, the impact of evictions has not been too great. Obviously, it's a dynamic process, and it is being monitored, and officers are on it, as they say. But thus far, the impact of evictions has not been too great.
I think the mental health is going to be a real tricky one, because sometimes the people who you think are least susceptible are actually the most susceptible. And what was coming through my mind there was Robin Williams. You know, one of the funniest people you could ever imagine, and you know, it just, yeah. And I think it's things like that, but it's actually creating the environment when people feel courageous enough to talk about things like that. The other key group of people that are very susceptible are armed forces or ex-armed forces, because you know they're trained to withstand anything, and you know they're tough guys, and yeah, you know, but actually they're real people underneath, and they suffered just as much. Yes, Matt.
Sorry, you're right, and I just wanted to respond by mentioning on the last kind of section of the report, it is generally, it's slightly random in that it's around support for littering, and you wouldn't necessarily think that that was to do with mental health, but what I do want to try to talk about in regard to Think Communities is the holistic nature of the way that we think about that. And if we're going to get the identification of people who are struggling with well-being and mental health issues, it's about understanding individually what's available in their communities to be able to support at the time when they might need it. And it might not necessarily be a counsellor or a therapeutic person, but it could be the local cycling group or the local walking group, and those are the kind of things that the Think Communities, the team that we've got, are really trying to look at it, empowering and understanding, and getting a register of the groups that we've got together, so that we can do those kinds of things. So that I just wanted to make that point, because that's why the report is quite ranging in its approach, is because yeah, that's the approach that we've got.
So it's almost a sort of a parallel. Well, the litter picking is a way of introducing people and and sort of signposting people once they've got there. Because I know, you know, we have the sort of fortnightly litter picks, but actually it's become more of a social thing. And I get told off because I do too much talking and less litter picking. But actually, that's part of it. Councillor Yassine.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Councillor. I just very quickly wanted to, that's very decent of you, just to add, just picking up on Councillor Sainsbury's point around signposting, the fact sheet that Matt mentioned, which contains information of organisations in the city to support people with mental health issues, but also things like domestic abuse concerns that you might come across in your day-to-day casework. We're not asking you to be experts by any means, but if you know who to refer to, it can be to me or Matt, but it can also be to any of these organisations. That fact sheet is on its way to you. And the reference to the armed forces, Councillor Fox will know very well, is that we do have both a member champion in Councillor Fox, does that job very ably, but also a covenant officer, a military forces covenant officer that works to Matt. And any of you that come across any armed forces personnel, serving or former personnel, that might need any support, both COVID related and otherwise, to Matt, he will be able to point them in the right direction.
Councillor Haynes.
Adrian, just to pick up on your point there, and Matt, can I then give a plug with regard to the support of the military to the Garden House? So the Garden House is the Rough Sleeper drop-in centre. We have excellent links in with the military, and one of the things that we've been able to provide time and time again is a link into a very specialist NHS service. So if you ever come across somebody, you know, even outside of that sort of homelessness sphere, let's have a conversation or email me, and we'll happily, you know, put these people in front of, you know, experts. And it's been something that we've been happy to do, and John knows our involvement in that. And time again, the military guys have said, but we didn't know this service existed, or we've slipped through the net, and I've been trying to get this service for the last few years, and you know, in weeks we've been able to do it. So, you know, we're happy to provide that.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. As it's been brought up, I'll ask the question. As you know, Tommy Kelly is our Armed Forces Covenant Officer. He was, first of all, employed, thanks to the help of the Garden Centre, etc., as a housing outreach officer for Armed Forces. He's now got the higher role, if that makes sense. And he's got the Armed Forces Covenant Officer's job, but we haven't got a Armed Forces Homeless Officer now. So is there any future plans to employ one? Because we need one to work with the Garden House, because it is important, because there are veterans out there. Nobody should be homeless in this day and age. We fully understand that. But veterans sometimes have got some very, very deep issues that they need pointing in the right direction, the same as most people need to be pointing in the right direction, as you appreciate.
Unless any of my colleagues are aware, I'm not unfortunately aware of whether or not that's a post we're recruiting to. It sits in a different, I'm sounding like a civil servant now, it sits in a different department, but I will take that action away myself and check and email the whole committee tomorrow once I've got an answer, if that's acceptable.
Councillor Howard.
So I just wanted to come back on the mental health aspects as well of Councillor Sainsbury's question. So if you haven't had a chance to look yet, there is a website called How Are You Peterborough? And the whole mission behind it is to try and get more and more local events on there to try and, because I think part of the mental health challenge will be getting people back out doing normal things. So, you know, do share the website, you know, within your wards, and also do let us know of things that are going on in your wards that we can get on the website to get people engaged, because it doesn't answer every issue there is with mental health, but for some people they will really benefit from knowing that there is things going on in their area that they can go to and get engaged with the community again. So the website is How Are You Peterborough? So if you haven't had a look, do have a look, and yeah, definitely do contribute to it and try and support it as well if you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tyler.
Thank you, Chair. Should be sorted and finalised by Thursday, but in the next couple of weeks we're going to be launching a project called Limber Away the Lockdown Blues. I don't know why I thought of it, but anyway. We're in two of the community centres that are local to me, part of my ward. We're setting up just gentle exercise classes followed by tea and coffee for residents, because it was pretty apparent during the election campaign there were a lot of people, you know, having a real struggle with either mental health, as Matt's referred to, physical health. People were, you know, just losing the will to live, basically. So, and we've had a fantastic response. And not only that, people are referring people already. So people are tagging other people into the social media. So we've got about 40 or 50 people on the list. So and these things sort of tend to take on a life of their own eventually. So you know, we've got a couple of really good instructors who have sort of gone all out to make sure that we're covering all bases and everything. But, you know, it was just an idea and it's sort of gone on from there, and people are just waiting for us to launch, really. But again, it's about bringing people back, getting people out of the house again, talking to other people. So,
thank you. Councillor Yassine.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is around mental health. So as councillors, we play many different roles within our wards. We sometimes are teachers, we can be nurses, we can be counsellors. But the question I wanted to ask is there any training available for us counsellors that we can attend, so that puts us in a better position to support our residents and maybe even signpost them in the correct direction as to where they can get professional help? Of course, I'm no mental health professional, so I wouldn't know where to start. I mean, I can be a friend and a listening ear, but I won't be able to go any further than that. So is there any training available for us?
Well, I would be a big advocate of the mental health first aid training that's available. I don't know whether it's standardly available to members, but it's a fantastic idea, and it's something that we've trained other council officers in. So I just think that that's something we should note and take forward, because I think it's an amazing idea.
I think you've hit on a really good point there, because we're asked to be specialists in a lot of fields, and they're not necessarily all that are gifted to us. So I think that's an excellent shout. And if we can get that down as an action, we'll definitely look into what options we can do. But yeah, I think you've hit a really good point there, and something we should look at for all councillors, probably not just in this committee, in fairness. Yeah, thank you.
And Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report. Page 61. Now, under the heading of mental health, you said, how are you, Peterborough? That's something on the website if you want to go there and log into it, and that will facilitate your mental health. Then on section 4.83, where you've stated that for youth, there were online activities for them to keep them engaged and occupied. My question is, how successful have they proven, these activities?
I think that, so taking How Are You, the website has been up for a while now as part of the mental health exemplar that the health services came and worked with us on, and I don't have the figures about how many people are using that, but it's widely seen as being a really good thing, and all partners are really engaged to try and get as many activities on there as possible. And I think that the Limber Up and Get Out activity, I think, is a really good one. We should have it on there. With the young people's work, I think it's been quite challenging. I think the reach, because of COVID, has been quite difficult. I think for some young people, it's really been a lifeline for the number of young people that have engaged. And I think it was building over the time that that young people were in lockdown. The numbers were building. And then we had the additional challenge of then lockdowns, we all came out of lockdown, but then young people were still in a restriction as they were going to school and still having to act in a different way and be in bubbles. And so a lot of the engagement with young people has been outside of schools, talking to young people and really trying to get their opinions and get how they're feeling, so that we can kind of tailor our engagement, our communications towards them. So that's my response. I don't have any kind of figures, but if that helps.
Thank you for your response. As we are the Scrutiny Committee, I would prefer the data. That's very important. I mean, on paper, it looks excellent. It's an excellent idea. But really, we want to know whether it's effectively working or not.
So
Yes, I mean, it's a comment. It's not an attack. I know COVID pandemic had an impact. You couldn't do things the way you want to do them. It's not an attack. It's just a comment that for me to scrutinise this properly, I mean, it's an excellent idea. It looks excellent. I want to know whether it is working or not, if it's effective or not. What are we trying to achieve out of it? And then we could work towards to make it better. So that's my question. In future, I think it would be wise if you have the data available, then we could actually measure it in terms of whether it's successful or unsuccessful. Just a comment.
So we do have the, I didn't include it in this paper, but just pinging back into my head, we do actually have the evaluation from it, so I can make sure members get the evaluation from the commissioned work. Thanks.
Councillor Fenner.
Thank you, Chair. Staying with, as you said, Councillor Howard, about specialist mental health issues, my concern is with dementia, not just elderly, but young dementia as well. Now we're coming out of the pandemic. People are starting to go out and about, etc. Some of these people have been stuck in the homes for 18 months. What are we doing to assist those and identifying those in the city that have this disease?
That's an excellent question, because to be honest, dementia is a scary world to live in, and probably even more scary during lockdown. So I think you've hit on a really good point there. I think when it comes to training on mental health, I personally feel it would be good to have that as part of it, in fairness. Definitely. So I think you've hit on a really good idea there. But yeah, I think you know, more needs to be done for that sort of engagement now, because as you've rightly said, I think a scary world anyway, but very scary during the last 18 months for them, definitely. Yeah, so yeah, something we need to do more work on, that's for sure.
Yeah, brilliant. And as a follow-up, is there any possibility of getting something in place where we can train up businesses, shopkeepers to identify signs, as say, because you can have somebody in the shop who is looking around. I've had an occasion where someone has been told to leave the shop because they're just hanging around, so it's not been identified by the shopkeeper.
That's a brilliant point. That's definitely something we can look into, I think, and see how wide we can put that sort of knowledge out there. But yeah, again, a brilliant point, I have to say. Yeah, and if there is a way to expand the communication on awareness, I think yeah, something we should do if we can.
I think Adrian would like to.
Thank you. Just to support and on that really important issue, both for older people but also younger people suffering from dementia. A really great source of information for all counsellors is something called the Peterborough Information Network. It's digital, so not necessarily great if for everybody, but we'll make sure if David can include the reference in the action notes, the link. I've just Googled it myself, got into the information network rather, and put dementia in as a search term, and it brings up quite a lot of information and resources available to people. And on the point around being dementia friendly, which I think is really what we need to be, it's really important that all of our council services certainly operate in a dementia friendly way, including libraries. I've plugged libraries a few times tonight, but they are spaces that people with dementia may well go into because they're seen as safe spaces. So the current leader, when he was deputy leader and cabinet member for adult social care, was very keen to promote the theme of being a dementia friendly city. So it will now be reporting into a different scrutiny committee, but we'll take that back into the Director of Social Services remit and make sure that that committee considers the theme of dementia as part of their work programme.
Thank you. And Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to Councillor Yassin, what she said recently, I totally agree. As you know, same as you, Chair, had a career. My first career was the Royal Navy, the second career was Cambridgeshire Constabulary, and I've lost count of the amount of courses I went on and different subjects we talked about, from so varied it was unbelievable. And as a councillor for 19 years, the training could really be improved, and I think it's important for young councillors coming in as well as, because even us old ones, because even the old can learn. We're all learning every day. But two courses I did go on was advanced counselling, which I thought was one of the best courses I've ever been on, and conflict resolution. It sounds like very dramatic, but that's the sort of stuff we deal with. And you can do this. And we have when we get back to normal, hopefully all-party policy will come back. But why can't we have once a month maybe a training session for councillors who want to attend and probably should attend? Because there's some good videos out there. You don't have to have somebody come in and talk about it. There's really good videos that you can borrow, loan or whatever that will cover these subjects, and it will be very advantageous to all councillors. And some officers, I'm going to be honest, would probably benefit from it as well. So it's one thing we ought to be looking into as a council. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Councillor Tyler.
Just a couple of quick points, if I may. Living Sport, if they're still the county provider, I've always done some really good projects and programmes to get buddy up schemes and volunteer schemes, but they run the whole gamut, so it's like mental health, people with learning difficulties, people with physical disabilities, and older people's groups as well. So it might be sort of tapping into their expertise. The young lady that's a regional officer around here is Rebecca. She got married recently, but I'm seeing her next week. But she has a disability herself, so and she understands what it's like to work with people with, you know, a whole myriad of, you know, mobility issues or mental health issues or whatever it may be. So, you know, they're probably good people to talk to about that sort of thing. The Dementia Reliance network, I think, is still going, Chaz. Is it? Oh, right, yeah. Because there used to be a network of organisations that would work together on behalf of people with dementia and family members as well, which is really important because, you know, so many people with dementia sucks in the partners or the family members as well, so having that support as well. But I think it went under the ban of the DAA, the Dementia Alliance or something, but it's just worth seeing if they are still together as an organisation, because you will get all those referral networks as well. And then finally, if I may, just very quickly, I unfortunately know Councillor Fox very well. And we run a committee called Supporting Peterborough Veterans. And before lockdown, we took veterans on trips, took them abroad. And when we came back, we were asked if we were going to do some talks to old people's homes, friendship clubs, coffee clubs, and that sort of thing. And I can't remember how many we did now, but probably 20 or 30, I don't know, 20 or 30 in a short space of time. And they worked really well because it was comforting for those people with dementia to think back to those days and, you know, who'd done what. And the amount of people that stayed behind and just wanted to talk. And some of those people hadn't spoken to anybody for a few weeks apart from the carers, you know. So there are things out there. I'm not just saying that to promote what we do, but I'm just saying there are things out there that, you know, and they don't cost a lot of money either. That's the thing. So anyway, I'm saying no more.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tyler. Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. Again, going back to Councillor Yazine's comments about training, the charity I'm involved with, we've just had training from PCVS, but also Belinda Charles can deal with it for the City Council. It's called Eyes and Ears, and that's excellent training. It basically gives the volunteers, we had all our volunteers do it, it just gives people an oversight on what to listen for, and what to look for when it comes to mental health and dementia, and it also tells them who to contact. So it's really good training, and it was free.
Thank you. And Matt, are you taking notes?
Yeah.
And Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the dementia, putting in place for people with dementia and helping them, what are we doing about the family? Because it's been 18 months that they've been stuck indoors, no respite, no day centres, no family coming in, sitting with them so they can do basic pop-up to the shops. Everything is all been on online delivery. Are we doing anything to support the families in those situations?
Well, I think we've had quite a long time supporting through the COVID period, obviously engaging with those that we know are shielding. The 90-strong network contains support from Little Miracles and from other disability groups. And I have to say it's not something that we have spent too much time talking in our delivery group about, but I think that these things that are coming up now are starting, the questions that you're asking are starting to come up numerous times in that group, and we're getting ourselves a part of the purpose of the paper really is to sort of show, and somebody mentioned about keeping the hub, is to show the kind of things that we need to reach out for and to do more on. And I'm making the notes around dementia friendly and making the notes around support for those who've been isolating for a long period of time, who now need to come out into the world. And I think that's the next step for the hub that we take forward.
Thank you. And Councillor Hasib.
Chair. I've got a question on, it's on page 59. It's people at risk from economic impacts from COVID-19. On 4.6.6, I think many people are aware that Council does help out regarding benefit claims and housing benefits and so forth on there. But point 5, it says investigation into the potential of creating a mortgage rescue scheme for those households where they are at risk of losing the mortgage property on there. So if you could elaborate on that, because that's something I was aware of. And if you can, help people out on there with mortgages.
Unfortunately, I can't elaborate on that, as Sean, who was the head of housing, was due to be here, who's unfortunately not well. So, Chair, I don't have the detail.
No, in fact, I've just said to Adrian here, that's another hour's discussion. But an excellent question, and actually that is, looking at the remit of this paper and all of the various things that we can be discussing. Actually, that's probably the thing. But I must admit, I'm going to have to sort of wind up this item now from a time point of view. But actually, that could be something as an action going forward that we. It's going to be something that we're going to be discussing, I think, going forward anyway, isn't it? I think everyone's, there's an elephant in the middle of the room, and that's probably that's probably one of the ones. I think Councillor Allen would just like to say something, just possibly to sum up this item.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak, Chair, and I was hoping I could speak last, because I just want to kind of sum up. It's quite a chunky paper. And it's wide-ranging, and indeed just touched on the housing issue, which Councillor Sainsbury raised earlier. But what I really want to go back to is my colleague, Councillor Howard, mentioned the How Are You website. And I think all of us say how are you as a throwaway statement. Do we really listen to the answer that anyone gives to us? That's what it's all about. So if we're going to operate that wide-ranging How Are You website approach, listen to the answers people give you when you ask that question. And it's incumbent on all of us to do that, not only as councillors, but as good citizens and fellow human beings. Coming back, one more item. The Think Communities isn't about what the man at the town hall can do for you. It's what you can do for your community, for your fellow citizens. And, there's lots of reasons the council can help you, but let's try and help ourselves. And that's what we've got to engender, that kind of philosophy in the community. And litter picking is a prime example of how we clear up our own back garden, our own backyard, our own street, and we get other people joining in on doing that. So that builds that philosophy. I'll shut up now. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Councillor. And I think that's very very wise words. And in fact, I think that's probably what communities are calling out for at the moment. And I think it's possibly one of the greatest things we can do for our communities. Just going out and chatting with people, and actually just looking at, if you were to look at this paper and think, oh, it looks as if litter picking is just the solution, to all our problems. Actually, what we've discussed this evening is a way that it can open doors into finding solutions to our problems. So actually, I think that's been a very good discussion. Lots of really good questions and lots of food for thought. Thank you very much, members. Thank you. Right, let's go on to. We've got through the main items for this evening, but now we've got to just review the work programme. Item 9, reviewing the work programme. Oh, no, actually, it's going through making sure we've done what we've done. Noting the comments of the Think Communities approach, I think we've done that. Noting the comments of the work preparations in place to deal with protected issues, I think we've sort of done that, although that was the thing that Councillor Haseeb brought up at the end. And consider how the Think Communities approach can support wider needs of individuals. And we've definitely done that. And I think, yes, well done to everyone for taking part in that. Item number 9 is a reviewing of our work programme. So has everyone had a look through I suppose the best thing to do is to look and see what we're doing or what we're planning to do. At the next meeting. So at the next meeting, next meeting, we're going to have the cultural strategy again, but that should be that should come back to us as a result of the consultation. It should be in its final form. With that, are we? It's not. We're not just rubber stamping it, though, are we? We're going to be able to ask in-depth questions.
Very much so. You'll be asked to scrutinise it in the traditional sense, which means just that. We want you to delve deeply into it, and there'll be time between scrutiny in September and any recommendation to forward it on to Cabinet for approval for any changes to be made. So yes, please.
Excellent. So actually tonight was a really good opportunity to sort of become acquainted with it for everyone, and perhaps have ideas over the summer when we see what transpires through the summer months. And then really, yes, we're onto the housing. And then there's lots of pendings. I think, has anyone got anything else that they would like to add based on this evening's discussion? I think we've got a fairly thing, and we'll be able to discuss that at group reps as well. Okay. For this one, okay. So we're going to consider items presented. Really? At the former Adults and Communities Scrutiny Committee 2021, and make recommendations for future monitoring of these items. Oh, so this is a big... Right. Okay. So, I'm on the right page now. So, July, joint scrutiny, completed. Going on to ongoing, and this is the one, the equality amongst and diversity. Now that was coming to full council a couple of weeks ago, but it was deferred to the next full council. So I think that's still ongoing. Yes? Sorry? Yes, please.
So, members, this report asks you to look back as well as look forward, and I think the Chair has taken us through the forward look. We just need to ask you to look back and seek direction from you on which of the matters that were brought to your predecessor committee during the last municipal year, those things that you want to continue to monitor in the coming year. So at 4.3, 4 and 5 in the cover report, this covers the items that were brought forward, plus the 4.7 task and finish groups that the Chair was just referring to. So that recommendation 1 is really seeking your direction on which, if any of those items, aside from the task and finish groups, which are still to report through this committee, need to be brought forward for monitoring during the course of the municipal year. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, I've found the right page now. Right. So what we doing? There are no. So yes. Yeah. So we do have no comments on that first page. No. Okay. So the second recommendation is to determine priorities and approve draft work programme attached Appendix 1. Now this is basically what we did at our previous meeting. Okay. Yes. Okay. So this is really ratifying what we've done. So this was. Now I'm getting back into where I was before. If we look going forward, is everyone happy with that? Yes. And then item 3, note recommendations in the monitoring report attached and consider if further monitoring recommendations made during the 2021 municipal year is required. And this then takes us. And have we got any comments on any of those? We're happy really to keep the ongoing ones. Are there any that are ongoing that have nearly completed?
Just give me one sec, Chair, and I'll bring up the list. Yeah, so as Adrian previously mentioned, the parental leave policy item has been delayed by one council meeting. The code of conduct, the revised code of conduct, which was endorsed by this committee, is due to go to the Constitution and Ethics Committee. So those recommendations together are still marked as ongoing. Similarly, there's a recommendation from this committee for the Task and Finish group on councillor equality to consider the adoption of voting buddies. So when there's an update from the Task and Finish group, that will come back. Also, there's the committee's long-standing recommendation to roll out selective licensing across the city, which I'm just updating as we go in terms of progress on the selective licensing scheme. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And any comments on that? Okay. Fine. So now we're... And just noting, and so now we just need to note our terms of reference. I think these have been published in the full council minutes as well. So I think, are we happy to note those? Councillor Fox.
I'll get a quick one, Chair. Our terms of reference is, number 2 is neighbourhood and community support, including cohesion and community safety. How do we get maybe on the agenda in the near future to discuss about, you know, our community safety, which is obviously regarding, you know, antisocial behaviour, policing, especially with the city centre. How do can we get to that on the agenda so we can discuss it and maybe put our ideas forward?
Yes, I think
it's really important, because I think that's what communities is all about. It's all those problems that our communities are faced with, you know, the graffiti, the litter, antisocial behaviour and all that. But how do we debate this? Because I've just done the online report to the police, and I'm not going to say which way I went, but you would probably be surprised when if you saw what I put. Because I think it's very important, very important. So.
I think that's an excellent point to put into our group reps, and to have it as an agenda item.
Because we used to have police attendants at times, didn't we, come and give them reports, and we haven't had that for some time now, and I think that's important. I don't want it to be a bait and match, but I think we have to represent our communities,
yep,
and we have to voice our opinions. If we're not happy with something, we need to express that, and if we are happy, then we need to praise. But if we're not happy, you know, let's say so, because I know, you know, in my community there's a lot of problems that need sorting, and they're not getting sorted, in my opinion.
No, I think that's an excellent. So we've got that down as a recommendation to discuss at group reps and how we can put something together in that. That's it. I'm seeing 4s and 3s all over the place. Right, okay. Now let's go on to the next one, forward plans for executive decisions. Has everyone had a chance to look through the document that David sent out earlier today? And has anyone come across any items that they would like brought into our agenda over the coming months? No? I think we're happy with that. I think if you do come across something, you know, because if you're in other committees and you suddenly see something that wasn't there before, you can always email your group rep, or you can email me going forward, and I can bring it up at the group reps, and we can find a way of putting it in. Because really, it's about us finding the things that we want to discuss that are in our remit to discuss on behalf of our residents. Okay, so that's item 10. Final item 11, is date of the next meeting, which is the 28th of September, after the summer. And let's hope that we're not wearing masks. Let's hope we're getting back to some sort of normality. Thank you very much, everyone, this evening. Thank you very much for the way you've taken part in all of the questions. I think that's been a really good discussion, and I think if we can carry on like that during the year, I think we can get lots done. Have a think about what you'd like to do as well, because I think the training that we had before was excellent, and let's see how we can change things. Thank you very much.